Now it's that time of year again. We are finally at the end of another year in Old School RuneScape. And I'm going to continue on my yearly tradition of doing a recap video of everything that changed in 2022. I'll mostly be covering the major updates that happened this year, but also a selection of other minor things as well. Now if we jump back all the way to the beginning of the year, back in January, the very first update of the year was actually a big one, and that was Nex, the 5th General. I actually forgot that Nex even came out this year because it was so long ago now. But with the introduction of Nex came the 5th and maybe final God Wars boss, as well as a handful of new best in slot items. Now Nex released on January 5th, and the first day I remember was very chaotic. Everyone was killing Nex in these giant mass worlds with like 100 people, and the odds of getting a unique item in these mass worlds were extremely rare. Now Nex came with its own set of best in slot items, the Zerate Vambraces, the Zerate Crossbow, the full Torva set, and the Ancient God Sword. And looking back, actually all of these items are fairly in the meta. Obviously Torva is just best in slot melee, that was always going to be good, but the Zerate Crossbow has found quite a few competitive niches, and the Ancient God Sword is actually a pretty popular PKing weapon, so everything does get used quite a bit. Now there was of course a bit of controversy regarding the drop rate. The original drop rate was 1 out of 43, but on January 13th they actually decreased it to 1 out of 53, where it remained like that for a few weeks until they finally reverted it. Nex still remains one of the best money-making methods in the entire game, even at the end of the year. Now on January 19th, we finally got the official release of the Shattered Relics League. Now if you remember, this was originally meant to be released in late 2021. Now the gimmick of the Shattered Relics League was to unlock content with Sage's Renown. Pretty much everything needed to be unlocked with these Renown points. Each skill required an unlock. Different bosses required you to spend Renown to unlock them. You could buy quest packs. Now along the way you'd find different relics and you'd be able to combine them into powerful new abilities. Now it seems like as a general opinion, people didn't like this league quite as much as Trailblazer, but I played it and I definitely still had a fair bit of fun. Now the very first update in February saw the release of a new wilderness boss, the Revenant Maledictus. Every time a person kills a Revenant, there is a chance that it will spawn the Revenant Maledictus in the world. Now if you do manage to kill the Revenant boss, you're going to get a guaranteed Ancient Emblem or Ancient Totem drop, as well as get a new powerful buff called 4-3's Surge, which could be used in the Wilderness Cave. Now in February, we also received a new quest, the Land of the Goblins. Now this was part of the Quest Backport project, so it's not new per se, but new to Old School. It was simply a mid-level quest that offered some decent experience rewards, but not much else. Now another notable update that came out in February were loot keys. Now the loot key system originally came from Deadman mode, but on February 23rd they finally ported that to the main game. In the main game, loot keys are very similar. Each key can contain 28 of your target's most valuable items on their person that otherwise would have been dropped on the ground. You can hold up to 5 loot keys at a time, and if you happen to kill another player with a loot key, you take it. Now jumping forward to March 14th, we have a pretty interesting update, although it's not content related. Jagex did finally release their custom launcher, the Jagex launcher. Now although on release it didn't have a lot of features, nowadays the Jagex launcher is super helpful. You can add multiple of your accounts to the Jagex launcher and easily boot up any of your accounts without having to type in any of your personal information. No authenticator, you can just authenticate everything once and you're good to go. And nowadays you can launch RuneLite with it, so it's really a win-win and saves a lot of time. Probably one of my favorite non-content related updates of the year. Now probably my favorite skilling update of all of 2022 was the Guardians of the Rift, which launched on March 23rd. The Guardians of the Rift is probably the biggest runecrafting update the game has ever seen, because not only did we get the Guardians of the Rift minigame itself, which is a arguably much funner way to train the skill, at the same time they also introduced the new runecrafting skilling outfit, the Raiments of the Eye, which would give you a combined 60% more runes whenever you craft runes, which is a massive increase to the rune supply. And on top of that, they also introduced the True Blood Altar in Mauritania, added in a legitimate way to craft blood runes outside of Arceus. The Guardians of the Rift also came with a brand new Old School RuneScape quest, the Temple of the Eye, which now offers a very simple way to get the requirement to do the minigame, which is 27. You just get it by default by finishing the prerequisite quest. There were a few other unique items added with the update, including the new Colossal Pouch, which allows you to combine all of your existing rune pouches together into one giant one, as well as the Abyssal Lantern, which is a minigame exclusive item that I still don't have yet. As a whole though, the Guardians of the Rift was probably one of the best updates of the year, and one that I wasn't excited about beforehand, but they really knocked it out of the park with this one. Now in April, the only notable content update that we got was the Beneath Cursed Sands quest. This is of course the precursor quest to the upcoming Tombs of a Mascot update, Rage 3, but as a quest on its own, it was a pretty decent master level quest that introduced the new raid, as well as adding in a few new unique items as well, such as the Circlet of Water that offered a chargeable item that would keep away thirst in the desert, as well as an upgraded Karis, the Karis Partisan. Now in the month of May, we didn't get any major content releases, but we did get a few important things I think are worth mentioning. May 11th, we got the final changes to the equipment rebalance, something that's been in the works for I guess 2 years almost at this point. Now as part of this final phase of equipment rebalancing, the tiers of different weapons were changed, such as the Grazi Rapier going from 75 attack to 80 attack, the Sanguinesti going from 75 magic to 82 magic, the Twisted Bow going from 75 range to 85 range, and the Scythe going to a requirement of 80 attack and 90 strength. There were some other ones as well, but it pretty much just shuffled up the tier 70 weapons quite a bit. Now something that came out on May 26th was Unranked Group Ironman mode. An Unranked Group Ironman is a much more flexible way to play the game mode. Unranked would allow you to invite a already existing Ironman account into your group, which means at any point you would be able to demote your regular Ironman to an Unranked Group Ironman if you wanted to play with your friends. There would be a separate high scores, and you'll lose your group's prestige as well. Now the first major update of June was a smithing update, the Giants Foundry. The Giants Foundry added in a new way to train smithing that was primarily focused on the efficiency of the items that you are using. It's not the best experience, it's not the most AFK, but it is very efficient for the amount of bars that you are using, which is particularly appealing to Ironman. The Giants Foundry was introduced with again a new quest, the Sleeping Giant, and to participate in the minigame, you would help this giant creating these custom swords. Personally, I found the minigame to be reasonably fun, but a bit interface heavy, but I did do a fair bit of it to unlock the new unique rewards, that being the Smith's outfit, which once you unlock it will increase the speed of anvil smithing by about 20%. The other notable upgrades that came with this was an 8 cannonball mold, which increases the amount of cannonballs you can make per hour, as well as it introduced the Colossal Blade, which is kind of a niche weapon that I'm not sure gets a ton of use, but it's meant to be strong against bigger enemies. Now on June 17th, kind of out of nowhere, we got a really interesting policy update, an update to which third-party clients are allowed and which ones aren't. Now previous to June 17th, you were technically allowed to use any client that you wanted, assuming that it didn't break any of the in-game rules, like it didn't give you unfair plugins or botted for you, but besides that, you could kind of do what you wanted. That was until June 17th, where they made an update to where actually only a limited amount of clients were allowed to be used, those being RuneLite, OSBuddy, and HDOS. If you use any other client, that is now considered a breach of the terms of services and your account could be banned. And probably the most surprising thing about this is they did actually follow through with that, and many accounts did receive temporary bans for using unauthorized clients. Now for the month of July, there was a bit of a focus on PvP with the release of the new PvP arena, or the Embers Arena. This came out on July 13th and added in a new way to participate in PvP. The Embers Arena is meant to fill the gap that the Duel Arena has created by being removed, but unlike the Duel Arena, Embers Arena is on a separate profile, so it's not your main account profile. Once you load into a PvP arena fight, you get bumped over to a different world. Now, although many rewards were pulled for the PvP arena, almost none of them passed, which means the only thing you can actually get as a reward from the PvP arena is a Scroll of Imbuing, which is like an alternative to Nightmare Zone Imbuing, a Blighted Wave Sack, and a Blighted Surge Sack. So at this point, it's pretty much just for rank, which many people think is not quite enough. Now, a small update came out on July 20th, which I think is kind of interesting, the Activity Advisor. This is something that I have almost never interacted with because it is designed for brand new players, but is meant to give them a list of goals to complete with some very minor rewards for them. On a brand new account, it might recommend, for example, doing Priest in Peril, Plague City, or the Fremenic Trials, and it's meant to make the early game less daunting for someone who doesn't know anything about the game. Now, it's hard to say how successful this was, but I'm almost certain the Activity Advisor has helped to clarify the early game a bit, which I think is always going to be a good thing. In early August, we received probably my favorite small quality of life update of the entire year, and that would be maximum hit splats. So thanks to the update on August 3rd, whenever you hit your maximum damage amount, you'll get a custom hit splat that will indicate that you hit your max. Really satisfying when you actually hit that maximum number, and also helps clarify what exactly your maximum damage is. Now, I don't think anyone would argue that the Tombs of Mascot was the biggest update of the year. August 25th it was released, and with it came the third raid to Oldschool Runescape. Now you can enter the Tombs of Mascot with up to 8 players, and it involves you taking on the 4 demi-bosses, Akka, Baba, Kefri, and Zebak, before finally taking on the Tumekin's Warden, the final boss. Now this raid differentiates itself a bit from the previous 2 by being, for one, more accessible than Chambers of Derek or Theater of Blood, and that's mainly thanks to the invocation system. The invocation system provides a high degree of customization, allowing you to tinker with the raid to get the perfect difficulty for your current skill level. Now, TOA was definitely the biggest content update of the year, but it also takes the crown for probably the most amount of changes to a piece of content in a single year. Pretty much every week for the first couple of months, there was always at least minor changes and even sometimes fundamental changes to the raid, the mechanics, and the items offered, so things got tweaked quite a lot. The raid offered a whole host of new unique items, including the new best in slot ranged armor, the Osmondton's Fang, which surprisingly ended up being one of the most popular items from it, despite people knowing almost nothing about it before the release, the Lightbearer, the Elidness Ward, and the showstopper item, the Tumekin's Shadow. And like pretty much everything else in the raid, these items have received multiple changes since the release. Now, although the raid continued to change throughout the months, on September 8th, they actually added in new raid cosmetic items, those being the new ornament kits. Now, unlike conventional ornament kits of the past, where you'd get them as a rare drop from the raid, for Tombs of the Mascot, you would actually get them by getting to a high enough level invocation. So this is a pure skill challenge, as someone who's extremely experienced with the raid could get them on their very first kill count. Now, they offered ornament kits for your Ava's Assembler, the Ward of Elidness, and the Osmondton's Fang. Now, October 12th saw the launch of the Quest Speedrunning game mode. Now, Quest Speedrunning takes place on separate worlds and only offers cosmetic items as a reward. Now, on release, they only offered a small selection of shorter quests, but they have expanded the quest offering a bit over the coming months. Now, by completing enough of the quest speedruns, you can unlock a graceful recolor, a new home teleport animation, and a giant stopwatch. Now, on October 19th is when Fresh Start Worlds were released. This was a somewhat controversial update that added in a completely separate game mode once again, but the only gimmick is you would start on a completely fresh account in a fresh economy, but there'd be no boost to experience rates, no relics, nothing like Deadman mode or leagues. It would simply just be a new game, new economy, but after 6 months it will merge into the main game and all the items, accounts, and levels would then be transferred to the main game worlds. Now, on October 27th, we saw the very first change to the polling system in pretty much the entire history of Old School. While in the blog they highlighted a bunch of different systematic changes they're going to take to how they approach polling, the main takeaway and the only mechanical change to the polling system is they actually reduced the passing threshold from 75% down to 70%. Now, as of yet, this difference hasn't really come into play with any of the newer polls, but I have a feeling that it will eventually. Now, the biggest update in November came right at the end of the month on November 30th. Now, with this update, they added in a new quest, new rewards for combat achievements, and even improved the quest experience reward for existing quests. Now, the Garden of Death update is a new addition to the Twisted Tales storyline, and is the only quest in the game that has absolutely no dialogue. Now, November 30th was a pretty exciting day for anyone who happened to have a quest cave, because they vastly improved the rewards for specifically Master and Grandmaster level quests. Now, if you have every quest done in the game, just by logging in, you could claim over 1 million experience worth of retroactive experience, primarily focused on agility, thieving, and a mix of other skills. And also in this update, they added additional rewards for combat achievements, some of these being actually pretty notable, such as Gohma's Lucky Penny, which gives a 5% chance to not consume any charges from items that you're using, which works on stuff even like the Scythe. You can have Thralls last 100% longer, and your cannon could even hold up to 60 cannonballs versus the previous 30, so a lot of actually pretty substantial additions. And that brings us to the end of the year, December. And honestly, in December, we didn't really get any actual game updates. Probably the most notable thing of the month was the Winter Summit, where they cover everything that's going to be happening in the first 6 months of 2023. I do have a video outlining all of the content that's coming, so if you're interested, go check that out. So that is it. That is the recap of the content in 2023 for Old School. What do you guys think? Were you happy with the year? Or do you think they could have done more? Let me know as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Now quickly before I go here, I just want to thank all of my members over on YouTube. Thank you so much to Alejandra, Prophet of the Boosh, Mitch Reinders, The Hybrid, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed at the Dragon tier. Also a giant thank you to yoyosup89 and NDM0001 for subscribing at the Runite tier. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.